Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, you've got a solo episode with me talking all things communication and connection. This is an episode off the back of a workshop I did a few months ago where I broke down what is needed for good communication and connection, whether that be in an intimate relationship, work situation, or even with your friends. In this week's episode, expect to learn how my partner and I do our weekly relationship check-in, a communication framework for business, why the majority of people don't feel truly seen, heard, and understood, the skills required to take your everyday connections to a new level, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we start this week's episode of the podcast, I want to talk to you about the Life by Design Mastermind. The Life by Design Mastermind is the mastermind for go-getters and high achievers who are looking to create a more successful, fulfilling, and balanced life by design. If you're serious about transforming your life, achieving your goals, and living a life on your terms, then the Life by Design is your golden ticket. Head over to the show notes and click on the link for more details about the program. Gang, what is up? Hope you are very, very well. So today we have another solo episode, and it's very much around communication and relationships. And I did a workshop a few months back called Communication and Relationship Mastery. And I wanted to take you guys through some of the tools that I spoke of on that day in the hope that your communication may level up. And also as a result of that, your relationship, whether that's your intimate relationship, if you're in one, or even tools that you can kind of take into your everyday life. So what I want you guys to be mindful of is if you get this wrong, people don't really see you. And having had lots of conversations around this, how often you're seen, how often you're not seen. The average person, I reckon, has less than 5 people that really see them and get them. And I don't know how that feels for you, but for me, that feels quite heartbreaking and also a little bit frustrating because there's a whole bunch of tools that you can develop and other people can develop in order for you to see people properly and for them to see you as well. I remember this stat. It was a 2018 stat, and it was on behalf of Cigna. I think that's how you pronounce it. And the stat was over half of Americans reported feeling like no one knows them well. And again, I don't know how you feel when you hear that, but when I heard that, like a part of my stomach dropped. I don't know what's behind all this, but I dance between this like sadness and heartbreak and empathy, and also like fucking pure rage and anger and frustration. And a lot of that rage, anger, frustration for me comes at the system, and in particular the school system. Like these skills that you'll learn today and these skills that are like ongoing in terms of communication and just human behavior skills, why the fuck these things learned at school is well and truly beyond my understanding. And how many times have you used algebra since school? So I don't know about you guys if you've got kids, but I know for me, when I have kids, these skills will well and truly be skills that I would be looking to develop. The other thing is, if you don't get this right, you often leave conversations and connection feeling kind of bored, depleted, and often empty. I've experienced this way too many times in my life, and I kind of went through patches where I was just like, that's just how it is. And then you come across people and conversations and connections that make you feel really full and energized and seen and heard and understood. And there's just a different energy about that. And again, for many people, they're kind of few and far between, but when you experience them, unbelievable. And what I'd get you to be mindful of is it's not a time thing. It's not even like proximity. And what I mean by that is you might have people that have been in your life for 20 years and you just have no real connection to them. I had a lot of these people. I don't have so many of them now, but I had a lot of these people in my life for an extended period of time. And I was like, this kind of relationship, friendship doesn't really have a huge amount of depth, and it doesn't have a huge amount of substance. And also at the same time, I've been in intimate relationships where that's the case, where you could be lying next to someone and feel 1,000 miles away from them. And in all honesty, and I haven't kind of spoken about this too much, I remember being in a intimate relationship, and I use that word in kind of quotations, if that's the right word, because it wasn't really that intimate and it wasn't really that much of a relationship in hindsight. And I remember going to an event and spending kind of 15 minutes talking to someone. And in that 15 minutes, I felt like I had a stronger connection with her at some random event that I was at than in a kind of, I think I might have been in the relationship for about 12 months at the time. And that has its own kind of challenges when you experience moments like that, but insightful all the same. And, having spent a lot of time in the coaching space now, there are a lot of people who feel similar, just haven't felt comfortable kind of talking through that. Another thing to be mindful of if you don't get this right is the feeling that you'll be lonely. And what I'd get you to be mindful of is the difference between being alone and being lonely. They're two very different things. Being alone is more the physical, e.g. no one's around you. Being lonely is more emotional. And again, I can kind of speak to this firsthand in terms of I've been in big environments and big rooms with a lot of people in them and felt like the loneliest person in the room. And at the same time, I've been kind of around one or two people and also felt like I had the depth and the connection that I was looking for as well. So yeah, something to kind of be mindful. Long term, if you don't get this right, your connections, your friendships, your life, anywhere near complete or as full as they could be. And again, for me, the thought of, you going to your grave and never being part of that kind of American stat of, 56% of people, no one knows me really well. Like, yeah, kind of heartbreaking. But for you to be on your deathbed and realize that no one really knew you is, yeah, like, what were you doing? What were you here for if that was the case? And again, everyone has their different kind of thoughts and feelings on that. It's kind of what hits me the hardest. At the other end of the scale, if you get this right, people start to see you. And what I'm really mindful of, and there's a level of ownership and potentially victim in this for me, is, I realized in a former life that I found myself frustrated, upset, angry that people didn't really see me. But I also, upon reflection, didn't give people the opportunity to really see me. And what I mean by that is, and this is constantly a work in progress, but if I look at the amount of masks and the ego and the identity that I carried, there was a lot of cover up. And the challenge that you face when that is you is that people develop a relationship with the mask. They develop a relationship with the persona, and the true you that sits in behind that never really gets seen. So it's almost like this double-edged sword of like, people are loving you and that kind of feels good in a very superficial way, but they're loving the version of you that's showing up. And the version of you that sits in behind that mask is still feeling a little bit kind of depleted and a little bit empty as well. If you get it right, there's also an opportunity for a new level of depth. And again, be really mindful that that can happen in like a 15-minute conversation, as opposed to someone that you might have known for an hour or, a decade or a year. You feel connected, which is a fucking amazing feeling. And long term, you can find yourself on like this connection high. And if you've ever experienced this feeling where you leave a conversation like, holy fuck, like that was epic, then, you'll know what I'm talking about. And one thing to be really mindful of is this is a skill set that can be developed, and it's an ongoing skill set as well that takes time, but is honestly one of the best feelings in the world. And I guess the question that I get you to kind of consider as we look into this, who is that person? All right, so let's rip into it now. When it comes to like proper connection, one of the first and most important things that is worth considering is the importance of just like stop talking and start listening. And the ability to listen properly is weirdly like a superpower. And the reason I say that is so few people have it. If I use myself as an example, in all the, like, I am very fortunate to have a huge amount of emotionally intelligent people around me. And if I was to reel off how many people have me feeling truly seen, heard, and understood, it would be 3 people. And that is a wild thing to think, but it's also kind of cool to think like, if you are that person for someone else, they'll know about you. 2 of these people are kind of in my world at the moment. 1 isn't as much, but I know them straight away, the 3 people. And then beyond that, it's probably not a case of whether you can feel people seen, heard, and understood, or you don't, but probably more like a sliding scale. And what I mean by that is that like we all have different skill sets and abilities in terms of how well we allow someone to feel seen, heard, understood, and kind of listened to as well. So in a world that is very much about me, if you can kind of stop talking and really start listening, you will go a long way to having people kind of feel seen, heard, and understood, and really creating that proper connection. One thing to be really mindful of is when we listen, we very rarely listen with the intent to understand. We're often listening with the intent to give advice, listening with the intent to give our opinion, listening with the intent for it to circle back to us, listening with the intent to kind of one up someone. We judge, we interpret, we explain, we theorize, we justify. And it's very rare that you just listen with the intent to understand. And I don't know about you, if you get into a conversation, you can almost see someone almost like building this intensity, looking for that little opening for them to jump in and speak. You kind of see them almost like bouncing, smile. Yeah, like I get what you're saying. And they're just waiting for their little opening. A really good listener is super grounded and like just fully present to what someone's saying. And again, when you see this, because it's so uncommon, it might even feel fucking strange to you. Like, what are they doing? Like they are just deeply present and deeply listening. And often a really good listener will follow up with a really good question. And your ability to ask really good questions is, again, a superpower that not many people have. The other thing to be really mindful of when it comes to like the art of listening and holding space is the skill of being a loud listener. So being really passive in terms of your listening can look like you're being present, but it can also look like there's like nobody at home when it comes to kind of what's going on in your mind. So smiling, nodding, giving those kind of gestures that look like you're active listening, and even at times paraphrasing back to them what they said, not word for word, but paraphrasing, give insight into your ability to kind of listen. The other thing to be really mindful of is don't be someone who one-ups them. And I know often this comes with a really good intention. So what I mean by that is like, whether it's one-upping or sharing your example of this, it might be, someone's having trouble with their partner and you think you're creating connection and empathizing by going, oh, me too. And then, for a lot of people, they kind of go into this spiel, and then this happened with my partner. Just like stay on them and with them in those moments. The other thing is to really wait until they complete. And again, for many, this will feel really awkward and like not being excited. It's a cool conversation. We're excited. We want to jump in. We want to give our opinion. We kind of want to bounce. But that little half second of waiting and really being sure that they have finished what they're saying is super powerful and super important. I think the other thing to be really mindful of, if we're kind of talking a male and female dynamic, males often find it harder to find their words, and they just need a little bit of space often to really gather their thoughts and then find ways to verbalize it and communicate it as well. So something to kind of be mindful of there. The other thing to be mindful of, and blokes tend to go into this more often than not, is to be really mindful not to go straight into Mr. Fix-It. So let's say that you're in an intimate relationship, and we're kind of talking heterosexual for this purpose. It's really easy for blokes to want to go in and fix it. And it's one of the more common frustrations I've experienced from women in terms of coaching them, when it comes to relationship dynamics. And one of the things that would be worth you considering is, do they want to be heard? Do they want to be hugged? Or do they want to be helped? And it's actually quite rare that they want to be helped, especially in the moment. If they're kind of in a heightened state, that's generally not the best time to help them. They may want to be helped tomorrow or the day after, once they've calmed down or kind of grounded themselves, albeit I wouldn't make that a assumption. But in the moment, generally kind of hugged or heard is a really important way to go. So the next thing to think about is like, how can you be curious? And, one of the big things that I often talk about is looking at everything with interest and curiosity, both for yourself, but also with others. Like, how can you almost be like this curious, inquisitive detective, and not from a prying point of view, but just like a genuine curiosity and getting to know the person. Too often we're like fixated on being really interesting, and for many it creates a level of social anxiety of like, I hope I'm interested enough. I hope what I said was valuable enough. The reality is if you know how to be interested and ask really good connections, then you probably don't have to say much. And one of the things I found really valuable using this thought process in a podcast content or context, is a lot of the feedback that I have had from guests is like, oh, you ask really good questions. And I think the reason that I ask good questions is because of a genuine curiosity and a genuine listening to what they're saying. And I'm like, at times, the questions that I ask, whether it's through the podcast or whether it's in general communication, can almost appear dumb. And the reason for that is if I don't 100% understand what they're saying, I want to ask again. Right. So I'll give you an example. You might ask how someone's week is, and they're like, it's interesting. And then your mind at that stage can easily like wander off to what interesting means, your own assumptions as to what that means. For me, I don't want to make assumptions. Interesting might mean, look, I've had a challenging week, had a fight with my partner, or interesting might mean, fuck, my car blew up, whatever it might be. So in those moments where you're not exactly sure, it's a really good opportunity for you to like inquire. And I want to be 100% sure and 100% clear on what that person's saying. So at no stage do I just want to like nod my head, and a lot of people do this. I don't want to just nod my head pretending that I know what they're talking about if I don't. So the other thing, whether it be in relationship or general communication, is to be mindful that if it's hysterical, it's historical. And what that means is that we all have different emotional charges. All right. And that might mean that, you might be talking about politics, or you might be talking about sex or whatever. And you can see that someone's like contracting, or they're uncomfortable, or they're anxious. And you in that moment have an opportunity to either explore with genuine curiosity or potentially kind of change direction in terms of what you're talking about. And what I get you to be mindful of as well is there's no right or wrong. All right. So for you, you might be petrified of spiders, and the next person is like, don't be stupid, or like, it's okay. Cool. That's not helpful. In fact, it's kind of dismissive, because for you, spiders aren't a problem. But for them, they're fucking paralyzed by spiders. So just being really open to being curious, knowing that if it's hysterical, it's historical. The next thing to think about is in our accusations and our assumptions, we often gain insight into our own mindset. So I'll give you an example of this. Let's say that you've got a gardener coming around to do the gardening. All right. You leave the back fence open, they're meant to come in, you're at work. You get home in the afternoon and no one's been. Where does your mind go? Does it go to, oh, they're so disrespectful, how arrogant, they're lazy, whatever it might be? Or does it go to, fuck, I hope they're all right. I hope something didn't happen to their kid, their dog, whatever it might be. The reason that becomes really valuable is that the universe is constantly reflecting back to us our own kind of internal state. So my question to you would be, if you saw that gardener as disrespectful, have you ever been disrespected? And I can guarantee that you have, because your mind wouldn't have gone there otherwise. If you didn't have some kind of wounding, some kind of story around that, your mind wouldn't have gone there. So in a situation like that, instead of accusations, assumptions, you actually gain insight from the universe into your own stuff. Like that gardener has become a mirror for you because you've gained insight into your own stuff, right? What about if someone didn't message you back? What's the story that you create there? What's the meaning that you've given it? What do you make it mean about yourself? All of these things become really valuable to you, not to anyone else, because it's not about anyone else. That person, that situation, that gardener, that person who messaged you back is all an excellent insight and a mirror for you about you and your stuff. All right. The other thing that I find really interesting, and when I was doing research putting together this presentation, the research actually went against what I'm about to tell you. So I'm going to kind of open this up to you take the research or you take my thought on this, having spent a lot of time exploring this. I find someone guessing how I'm feeling actually a break in rapport. All right. So that the research said, the research essentially said it creates connection by guessing someone's feelings. From my own experience, it didn't create connection or didn't build rapport. So I'll explain what that means. So let's say that you had you're flying interstate and you had a bit of a bumpy ride, and you go and see your friends who you're staying with, and they ask, oh, how was the flight? And you're like, oh, it was actually quite bumpy. And then their assumption of how you feel could go something along the lines of, oh, fuck, that must be terrifying. And then for you, well, it wasn't really terrifying, actually. I was just kind of maybe a bit anxious. I think, from my own experience, because I've really sat with this, that it actually breaks rapport. What I think is actually a better way to go about this is to say, oh, so how did that make you feel? And then you open that conversation, that dialogue up to creating connection off the back of that as well. The next thing to think about when it comes to communication is grounding yourself. If you're really fucking scattered, or if you're really kind of wired in your nervous system, it doesn't create a great environment for connection, right? So whether it's anxiety, whether it's really kind of noisy head, you can kind of tell when someone's really present and grounded with you and if they're not. And often when you're in communication or in connection, you're in one of three places. You're either in your own head and you're kind of overthinking, you're kind of anxious, that type of energy. You might be all in their energy. So you're like almost psychoanalyzing or overstating their state. Or ideally, you've got a level of attunement and presence to what's going on for you in your body, have a level of awareness around what's going on in their body, and then connection between the two of you. And that's the ideal state that you want to be. If you're dysregulating your nervous system, if you're experiencing social anxiety, if you're like lacking presence, whatever it might be, it becomes quite challenging to sit in that space of the three of you. The other thing to be mindful of is don't fear the pause. And again, for people that experience social anxiety, this can be really challenging because you like a sec. I think it's the Japanese. They have something like a 5-second pause in between conversations. I reckon if you're an Aussie and you went into that conversation, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? Are you okay? But even that 1 second gives the person an opportunity to potentially, and you'll be amazed how often this happens, continue to speak. And you'll be amazed how often we cut someone off. Again, often well-intended, excitement, wanting to share our piece, but we're still cutting them off. So just be mindful to really create enough space for the pause so that they can kind of talk through it. The next thing to consider when it comes to like real connection is the importance of doing your own work. So what I mean by that is your ability to hold someone in whatever it is that they're experiencing is influenced and impacted by your ability to hold yourself or to the level that you've been. So let's say someone's really angry. If you don't have a good relationship with your own anger, you're going to find it really challenging to hold them in their anger. And one thing I was really mindful of is I had an incident the start of last year, and it fucking rattled me. And I was weighing up at that time between two coaches who I know quite well, two coaches who have been in my world for quite a while. And I get along with them both very well, but I knew there was only one of them who could handle my ability to kind of communicate and talk that through. Ended up making a good decision and they were able to hold me. So the reason I share this is you might say, yeah, I don't judge or whatever. The challenge is that most people can read your energy. So you can say one thing and your energy be a different story, right? So the deeper the healing, the deeper you go into your own psyche, your own gnarly shit that you've worked through, the better you'll be at holding someone else in their energy. The final thing to be mindful of is safety. So for people, when it comes to a conversation, they generally don't feel, consciously or unconsciously, they don't feel that safe. And there's a number of different ways to create safety, many of which we've spoken about. But one that you want to be mindful of is to understand building rapport is a bit of a dance. So let's say that you're meeting someone for the first time. Instead of going from 0 to 100 thinking that's vulnerability and whatever, which it's not, it's just fucking dysfunctional. Try to dance that vulnerability. So you might meet them and you go a layer deeper, and then you observe just from a place of curiosity how well they sit with that. Can they handle it? Are they open to it? Do they seem open and receptive, or a bit more closed and contracted? And then you work from there. Okay, maybe we can go a level deeper and just dance in with that. Don't be the person who goes to a party and has 6 drinks and all of a sudden you met someone for 5 minutes and you're fucking sharing your life story, thinking you're best friends, you add each other on Instagram and you never talk to each other again. Like, have some wits about you as to how to dance that situation. There's also a number of different communication tools that will support you when it comes to relationships. If you haven't heard me speak about it, I'll speak about it a lot. The relationship check-in is excellent. And that is something that I suggest you do on a weekly basis. I've been doing it in my relationship for over 3 years, and every Sunday is that opportunity. There's a number of reasons why this is super valuable. But at the end of the day, in order to be able to voice what's going on for you, understand yourself better, understand your partner better, and understand your relationship better, there needs to be a recurring space that you can talk about it. One of the most common things for relationships is this build up. Is often it resulted or it started from something quite small and insignificant, and it's built up because there hasn't been an opportunity to kind of talk and walk these things through. So if you haven't, I'll post the link in the show notes. But I've got a really basic communication tool that helps you kind of check in each week, which is super valuable. The next thing to be mindful of, I did relationship coaching through a group called the Gottman Institute, which is an American organization. And they have this thing called the 4 horsemen. And it's essentially the 4 do not do's in a relationship if you want healthy long-term relationship. The first one is criticism. Second one is defensiveness. The third is contempt. And the fourth is stonewalling. So stonewalling is very much where you shut down, and a lot of people do that. Contempt is very much that kind of inferior energy that can come with things. Defensiveness, exactly as it sounds, and as you probably are aware, criticism as well. So in order to change those, it's good to think of like the opposite of criticism as using gentle starter, and learning with time how to communicate at your best will go a long way. With defensiveness, learning to take responsibility. With contempt, describe your own needs and feelings instead of describing your partner's. And with stonewalling, learning to self-soothe, which can be a little bit of a practice as well. The next thing I get you to think about is positive reinforcement. So having lots of conversations with women, and ideally, you know, it's definitely not exclusive to women, but women really desiring to get their man to kind of step up more and step more into, you know, whatever it is that's needed. I don't know a bloke, unless he's a bit of a bitch, I don't know a bloke who loves nagging or getting nagged by his partner. But what I do know is that blokes do like to protect, provide, and in order for that best to happen, positive reinforcement goes a long, long way. So let's say, for example, that you want him to take the rubbish out. Instead of like nagging, no one likes that nagging energy, looking for opportunities to positively reinforce the things you want more of will go a long, long way. So it might look like, hey, I love it when you take lead and you take the bin, or I love it when you organize date night, whatever it might be, and really like bring it home how much you love it, and that way you'll get more of it as well. Another thing to think about when it comes to communication is being mindful that if it's just you two, it's going to wear thin. So what I mean by that is having a relationship where you're so codependent on each other that you share everything with just each other is not that healthy for the relationship. Some might tell you otherwise. They're probably codependent. And while we definitely want to create a relationship where, you know, things are spoken of freely, you also want to have another outlet. You might want to have another outlet as a therapist, a coach, a, you know, circle of women, circle of men, whatever it might be. Having an avenue to talk things through will serve you really well. Another thing to think about when it comes to communication is your approach. All right. And one of the best things that you can do is shift from you to I. So what that looks like is you do this, you make me feel this way, you. Generally is like red rag to a bull. They're going to get pretty pissed off. As opposed to, I feel about this is a lot more effective way, and you'll find that your partner or whoever's you kind of voicing this to is a lot less protective and a lot less defensive as well. One thing that you kind of want to pick up, emotional intelligence, social awareness, these type of things, again, are skills that are developed. And one of the things that you want to be able to develop is knowing how to read the room, knowing how to read the energy of the room, the energy of, you know, your partner, etc. So I'll give you an example of where I've been horrible at this. So 7 years ago, I reckon, my timeline's right, I was dating someone who had a 9 to 5. I was in the fitness space at this stage. She was lawyer, kind of 9 to 5. And she got home, and one of the things that I was doing was, because I was in the fitness space, there was a lot of like adrenaline type energy. And I would, be pumping with the classes and everything. And I'd turn the music off and I'd come flying home. At the time I was working in Wallara, in Paddington, and we were living in Wallara. So it's like a 5-minute drive. Keep in mind that she's been home since 5, had a bath, had dinner, and is on the couch kind of reading, having some downtime. I come in like a fucking hurricane and I do not meet her in any way, shape, or form with where she's at, which is like downtime. So one of the things that I shifted, which really helped, was first obviously having the awareness around it because you're starting to get fucking annoyed. The second thing was literally as soon as the session finished and I became mindful of like I had to kind of de-escalate, so to speak, is I would intentionally start to slow my breath down. And on the drive home, I wouldn't play any music. So, because what I found I was doing before is I was pumping the music and I was just keeping the adrenaline high, high, high. So what it really did is it gave me 15 minutes of time between when I finished the class and getting home to bring myself back down to a level that I could meet her a little bit better with where she was at. So there's a couple of things to be really mindful of. The last thing that I want to bring to your attention is something that I've used a lot of in my time with Genoa as a business partner. And also I use this a lot in, coaching, more so in the kind of life by design program as well. And that is challenge and champion. So one of the things I struggled with when it comes to communication is sometimes feeling like I need permission to come forward and speak what's on my, what's on my heart or kind of what I need to speak to. And one of the things that really helped me navigate that with Genoa was having this challenge and champion. And what that would look like is we would champion each other on something that we're doing well, or sorry, that the other person's doing well, or that we're loving, but also challenge them on something that they could do better, step into, etc. Now, there's a lot to be said for the way that you deliver something, all right? So instead of saying, hey, you shit with your time or whatever it might be, a healthier approach to challenging them might be, hey, brother, I'd love to really see you hold yourself accountable to, get into meetings on time, the next month or something like that. There's a lot to be said for the delivery, and that's a kind of a bit of a work in progress. So a couple of things for you guys to think about. There's a lot of tools in there. And, when I did this workshop, I was really mindful to encourage people to take their time with this process. In all honesty, to become really good at communication, it could be a 12-month process. And if that's the case, just give yourself that time. So a couple of ideas for you to work on when it comes to communication connection. And I swear to God, if you become a master of this, your life and the life of the people around you will level up big time. Enjoy.